Hello and welcome to Shauns Take, brought to you by the Keystone Sports Network. Here are your hosts, Jim and Shaun.
Hello and welcome to Shauns Take, brought to you by the Keystone Sports Network. I'm Jim Galante. He's Shaun Gold. Shaun, it was a crazy weekend in college football last week. You and I, well, I'm not sure we survived it or not.
Yeah, that was actually one of the most crazy weekends, not just, in recent memory, but in college football history when you really break down the numbers there with ranked teams losing, and we're going to dive into that. But it was quite the weekend, to say the least.
And we both suffered from it. But I think what's interesting, I want to take a look at a couple of the games or a couple of the teams, let's put it that way, that we both took last week, and really fascinating stories, and that's both Penn State and Texas. We all know what happened with Penn State at UCLA, just an awful performance, and as awful as they played, as well as UCLA played, Penn State still had a shot at the end of the game and still continued to underperform and make mistakes. Meanwhile, we had Texas and Florida. And I think we both had the feeling of Florida going south, Texas looking to recover, put it together. Well, guess what? That didn't happen, and Florida won outright. Well, now, I guess my question is, Shaun, we now have Penn State, Texas, and Clemson. All three teams that were ranked in the top 5, all three teams getting a lot of support to win a national championship. And my question to you is, when making picks, looking at those teams, at what point do you finally say to yourself, you know what? This is not the team I thought they were when the season started. Or are you holding on to that thought with any of these teams?
And that's one of the hardest things to do in this space, because it's like, how do we keep backing these teams when week in, week out, they're showing us that they're not what we thought they were? But then you also know in the back of your head, the second you flip over to saying, you know what, I've given up on this team, well, they're going to be the best team in the country for 5 straight weeks just when you lose hope in them. So it's really hard. I think, it would help if we were able to be on the inside of some of these programs. You have no idea what morale is like. Like, I've been on teams where a couple losses just decimates the team, and they're never the same despite the talent that they have. And there's other teams where, one loss can really lead to a whole lot of success down the road. So it's hard to know, what's going on inside these locker rooms. How are these teams responding? And when you're put against this adversity, you like to think you respond positively to it, but the reality is sometimes they don't. And it's hard to tell, are these teams feeling like, hey, if we turn it around, we can be everything we thought we would be and that the public thought we would be? Or are they just defeated and are ready for this season to be over, and you got whatever 6-8 more weeks left in the season? That's just not going to be a fun 6 to 8 weeks.
And for those who don't think that happens, it does. An example, now this is from before your time, Shaun, but I have a friend who was on the 1999 Penn State team. 9-0, ranked number 1 in the country. Minnesota comes into Happy Valley and upsets them with a 4th down prayer of pass, goes up. It's knocked down into another offensive player's hands for the 1st down. They end up kicking the winning field goal. And then Penn State lost their last 2 games because, as my friend said, that was it. All national championship hopes went away. This was not the era of 12-team playoff. And that was it. That loss just put them into a tailspin. And 1 loss became 3. Now, we've heard a lot of conversation at Penn State that for many years, they'd lose to, I think, back-to-back years, it was a loss to Ohio State, and the following week they lost to Michigan State in an upset, where that 1 loss can turn into 2. But at what point does it turn into a lost season? And there's a way, and knowing Penn State better and their schedule, after Northwestern, and here's a crazy statement I'm going to make, there's no way in the world that they could lose to them, Shaun. But the following week, they travel to Iowa. We just found out it's going to be a night game. Boy, they have to win that, or then they have back-to-back weeks of Ohio State and Indiana, 2 top 10 teams. This could very easily spiral out of control and turn into 7-5. I didn't look ahead at Texas's schedule, but they're in the Southeast Conference. Could that spiral out of control? So again, it comes down to that question: at what point do you give up on a team? What point do you judge that they're giving up on themselves? We'll see. And we're going to see with your picks this week what you think of that. Speaking of Texas and Penn State, let's go right to Penn State to lead off our show, Shaun. It's Northwestern at Penn State. By the way, a couple weeks ago, Northwestern beat UCLA. UCLA just beat Penn State. By the transitive property, Northwestern should be favored. We know that's not happening. Penn State is a 21.5-point favorite in this one, Shaun.
Well, Jim, put it this way. There might be riots if Penn State doesn't get a massive win here. So I think I had, more metrics kind of going in the favor of Northwestern after everything that happened. But like I said, we're going to see real uproar in Happy Valley if this team does not turn things around in a massive hurry. They cannot wait a couple weeks to get their mojo back. So for that reason, I'm a little reluctant, and I haven't fully given up on Penn State, but do I think they're going to be a playoff team at this point? Unlikely. I think they need to win out, probably except for Ohio State week. And do I have faith that they can beat both Iowa and Indiana? At this point in time, no, I don't. But do I have faith they're a lot better of a team than the one that lost to UCLA? Absolutely. And UCLA, to their credit, played a great game. And I think they're showing there is real talent on that UCLA team. And maybe it was a big coaching thing, and that's why they couldn't get over the hump. And that's, why they were a completely different team against Penn State. I think Penn State gets home, resets, gets a big win like they should, and then regains some confidence to say, hey, look, we've got Iowa, Ohio State, and Indiana coming up. Can we go 2-3 here and save this season? So I think that's the situation Penn State's in. So I don't love it, but I do think they're due for just much better performance. And I'm going to take the 21.5 there in favor of the Nittany Lions.
Shaun, here's a situation where also looking at the numbers, Penn State is 0-5 this season against the spread, which means they did not live up to expectations in any of the weeks that they've played. And I think that's a fair assessment in watching each one of those 5 games. And it's still, can they recover? There is still all the talent in the world there, okay? To have the amount of talent they have on that offense and struggle, giving up 40-some points to UCLA from that defense does not make sense, Shaun. I'm going to keep at it. They say insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. One of these weeks, they are going to come to play and show that talent. Let's keep our fingers crossed that it happens this week. I've got the Nittany Lions. All right, next one up. This is a fascinating game to me, Shaun. Ohio State, your number 1 ranked Buckeyes, are at Illinois. We know a few weeks ago, Illinois was embarrassed by Indiana. Now they've got a situation where this is their Super Bowl. If they have thoughts of making a playoff, it's beat Ohio State at home. Ohio State, just like Penn State, was a 21.5-point favorite. Ohio State, 2 touchdowns plus a half. It's a 14.5-point game here, Shaun.
I love what I've seen from Ohio State this year, and I also do like a lot of what I've seen from Illinois. If we take away that Indiana game, Illinois has been a really good team this year, and the first thought I had in this game was that the spread was a little bit low for how good Ohio State's been, and you take into account Illinois in their biggest game got absolutely manhandled by Indiana. It seems like Ohio State should have very much an upper hand. However, I'm going to look past on Ohio State's side their 42-3 win against Minnesota from this past week and look more at their Washington win, which was 24-6 on the road at Washington. I think this game against Illinois is closer to that Washington game than it is to the Minnesota game. And I think the market's also telling us that Illinois is going to put up a fight in this one. And that's why it's not a 20.5-point spread or a 21.5-point spread, which logically is kind of where maybe I thought this line was going to be, just with how good Ohio State's been and how unstoppable they still seem to be. So I think Illinois is going to step up to the occasion. Like you said, this is a massive game for them. And at Illinois, Big Ten atmosphere, I think they're going to have a shot in this one. So I don't think it's a pushover. I like Illinois to cover the spread.
This one was a tough one to call. And I think what it means for Illinois and the fact that they're at home are huge factors in this game. But Ohio State is number one for a reason. And Illinois is going to try to turn this into a rock fight, okay? They want it to be a game that's in the teens. That's their best shot at winning. It's a smart strategy. I just think Ohio State, especially with their receivers, they're capable. They're going to try and turn this into a different style game. They're going to try make it high scoring. If that's the case, Illinois can't keep up with them. I wouldn't be surprised if Illinois keeps it within range, that 14-7 game at halftime, something like, or 17-7. They'll keep within range. But in the second half, in trying to win the game, Ohio State will score that last touchdown or two. 24-14 will turn into 31-14 at the end of the game. I'm going with the number one Buckeyes. Okay, next up, let's go to the Southeast Conference for our next couple games. Interesting. This is interesting for our Penn State listeners. It's Alabama at Missouri, the Fighting Bo Perbulas. They're at home to Alabama. Now, Alabama started out the year with a loss, but I think they've come back. They had that huge win against Georgia. Alabama is a 2.5-point favorite at Missouri.
The hardest thing about this one is kind of what you just said. I look at strength of schedule here. Missouri's best wins come against South Carolina, and we're looking at an Alabama team that beat Georgia and then followed up beating Vanderbilt, who's also a very good team this year. So Alabama's been much more battle-tested so far this season, but I also think the spread being at 2.5 points is telling us that while Missouri hasn't been battle-tested yet, they're a legitimate team in the SEC, and they have a real path towards contention here. So I think home field means a lot in this game. I also like the fact Missouri's coming off a bye week, so they've had 2 weeks to prepare for Alabama, who is coming off two very tough physical games. Like it does take a toll on you that you've had two really high intensity games and now get a third one. It's been a gauntlet for Alabama, and they've, responded incredibly well the past 2 weeks to that. But I'm not sold on Alabama, and I still think there are, holes in this team like we saw last year with a couple of their losses and like we saw in week one. So I think Missouri has a shot in this game, and because the spread's only 2.5, I think the market is saying that this is a pretty even matchup, and at home, I think Missouri can have some magic. So I like Missouri plus 2.5 in this one.
I bought in on Alabama. I think after their early loss, how were they going to bounce back? A lot of pressure on Kalen DeBoer. Those Alabama fans, they're not used to 2-loss seasons, okay? They expect undefeated. They'll put up with 1 loss. That's what Alabama fans think. I think Kalen DeBoer has weathered the storm, has put it together, and with it just being 2.5 points, I think Alabama goes on the road and beats Missouri in this one, Shaun. So another one where you and I are split. All right. Our next game, staying in the Southeast Conference, it's Oklahoma, undefeated Oklahoma at Texas. Very quietly, Oklahoma's snuck up the rankings. They're at number 6 this week. They're at Texas. We're back to the question that we started our show with, Shaun. Texas, number 1 team in the country going into the season. Where are you with them now?
Well, I have to say I'm a whole lot lower on them, which is understandable. But how does that apply to this game against Oklahoma? Jim, I don't think there's been anything this year that makes me think Texas is a better team than Oklahoma. Preseason, this spread was 9.5 in favor of Texas. We're clearly seeing that Texas just isn't that team, like we talked about in the beginning of this episode. They've had a good win against Michigan, a good win against Auburn. They're battle tested. They've had big wins against ranked teams. And Texas's issue, and this is why I'm going to side with Oklahoma in this game, Texas's issue has come offensively. This offense with Arch Manning has not been what we thought it would be, has not been the Sarkisian, high-powered offense we thought it would be. They're going up against an Oklahoma defense that gives up the fewest total yards per game in the country, second fewest passing yards per game in the country, and the second fewest points per game in the entire country. And sometimes you can overlook those metrics because of strength of schedule. But again, they've played a good Michigan team and a good Auburn team and shut both of them down. Texas struggled against a good Florida defense. And I think this Oklahoma defense may be even better. So I like Oklahoma to be able to get a win in this game. I don't think they should be underdogs here. And I know Texas is, in a great bounce back spot. But Jim, I just don't think they can put up the points needed to beat this Oklahoma team.
As we were talking, I did a quick lookup, and my search was on John Mateer injury, the Oklahoma quarterback who had been playing so well. And it turns out he may actually play in this game, which wasn't necessarily expected. That's the injury update. I feel better about Oklahoma if they have their starting quarterback back. Texas, I am truly wondering about them. I'm truly buying into this is not the Texas team that we thought they would be. I'm going with Oklahoma on this, and I'll take those 2.5 points. So, all right, we both have Oklahoma. Now, this huge game, and who would have thunk this? Indiana. Top 10 Indiana at top 10 Oregon. There's still people who won't believe in Indiana completely. And this is a game where if they would win this game, I think they would be over that hump. People would really believe in them. Oregon is a 7.5 point favorite at home, Shaun.
Initially, I was going to be all over the Oregon Ducks for this pick. I think they have a case for being the best team in the country. I think they're right up there with Ohio State and Miami. However, this line's been moving in the wrong direction. Preseason, this was a 14-point spread. Last week, it was a 10.5-point spread. Now we're down to 7.5 points. That's telling me that there's a lot of support for the Indiana Hoosiers. And they've given us nothing but incredible performances this year. And I think this is a week where, they want to show we are a legitimate top 10 program. We're a legitimate team to represent the Big Ten in the college football playoffs and be a legitimate national championship contender. And like you said, nobody's giving them that type of credit. So this is their chance to show, hey, we might be better than the Oregon Ducks, and Ohio State, you better be looking out for us because we're better than we were last year, and we're coming for you. So I think this is a great spot for Indiana to pull off a cover and, hopefully for their sake, pull off a big upset win that could just do wonders for their program and their namesake across the country.
Shaun, you talk about the national narrative is still, we're not sold yet on Indiana, okay? You are. Guess what? I'm among that group who isn't quite sure yet. They might convince me with a win here, but I don't see it. I know it's 7.5 points. I could see this being, again, another one of those games. It's one score going into the fourth quarter, late in the game. And Oregon, they're the last team to score. They turn it from a 7-point game into either a 10 or a 14-point game. I'm going with the Ducks in this one, Shaun. All right, that is it for our show. We got our picks in. Fingers crossed, Shaun, for this week. Thank you, Shaun. Thank you all for tuning in. Make sure you check up on us again next week on Shauns Take.
Keystone Sports Network.